Welcome to Mind, Body, Soul Mastery, the podcast where transformative journeys unfold through authentic conversations. I'm your host, Brenda Stott Tomlinson, your guide on this exploration of self-discovery, resilience, and holistic well-being. Join us as we dive deep into the interconnected realms of mind, body, and soul, unraveling the wisdom gained from the messy, the challenging, and sometimes the most heartbreaking moments in life. Get ready for deep and meaningful dialogue that inspires and cultivates empowerment. This is Mind, Body, Soul Mastery. Hello. Today I have with me Elizabeth Kipp. She is a chronic pain management expert, an addiction recovery coach, an ancestral clearing practitioner, yoga teacher, and best-selling author who is in long-term recovery from chronic pain and concurrent addiction. She specializes in helping people heal from chronic pain and offers workshops and individual sessions around the world to help those she works with release the grip of chronic pain and addiction. Elizabeth, welcome to the Mind, Body, Soul Mastery podcast.
Well, thank you so much, Brenda. I'm grateful to be a guest, and I'm so grateful for your platform.
Oh, I'm just glad to have you here and to have this conversation. We were just talking earlier about the messy things in our life and how that's a catalyst for profound growth and transformation. Do you have a moment or a story from your life that you're willing to share with us?
Sure. So how did I get to be a chronic pain expert? Right. I was in chronic pain. I had a chronic pain experience for about 40 years.
Mm,
And about 10 and a half years ago, I finally found a doctor and a way to actually heal from that. Doctor that really understood the nature of chronic pain and understood
mhm.
that you can't separate my body from spirit. It looked at me as a whole person. So,
That's a beautiful thing to
so
find a
it,
doctor,
yes,
who sees that.
it was astonishing to me. So let's just define chronic pain for the audience. Chronic pain is any pain that's felt 15 days out of 30 for 3 months or more.
Mm,
Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. The brain can't tell the difference between one and another. It sends the same signal. It hurts. So a grief experience can be a chronic pain experience.
mm,
The brain can't tell the difference between a broken bone and a broken heart. So here's the thing about chronic pain. It we normally in acute pain, we have an injury or a threat kind of thing, and our stress response, we have this beautiful stress response. It goes into the on position. We deal with the threat of the injury. It goes back into the off position. In chronic pain, the stress response gets stuck in the on position. So we're constantly under stress. That would be what chronic stress is as well. Chronic pain, chronic stress.
yeah.
And we're not really as creatures, we're not made for that. We're not made for that. We're made for this other stress response goes on, comes off, we're back to balance. In that hypervigilant situation, it's very stressful for the body and it can lead to disease and illness. And it's just very corrosive for the body. So the story I want to tell you about this is that chronic pain has this way, and I'm not the only one. I've sat with thousands of chronic pain patients over the years because it was a long time I was in it. Chronic pain has this way of drawing your attention away from everything but it. And so your attention's on the pain. And what's interesting, I was thinking about this before the podcast, and I was like, oh, it wasn't just that chronic pain pulled my attention away from everything, but it seemed to me like it pulled everybody else's attention away from everything but it that I was with. And we're all focused on that. That's a powerful statement I've just made. And I think everybody that's had that experience will go, you know what? Elizabeth's right. That's my experience of it. Here's the problem with that for me. I then became identified with the pain so that I ended up thinking in my mind that I was pain. So the pivotal moment for me was when I realized that's not who I am.
Mm.
It's the experience that I'm having, but it's not who I am. So I was able to create some distance between me, the true self, and
Yep.
the experience I was having. And that right there shifted everything. All of a sudden, I became empowered where I had been in victimhood.
It just became this break, right? When you were talking about chronic pain is the only thing you focus on, my thought was, well, of course, what you're focusing on, it heightens, it amplifies, it makes bigger, right? So if it's just always pain,
Mhm.
it those thoughts are contributing to making it larger.
Well, yes and no. I'm just going to dive right in. So, what's the meaning that we're making of the pain? Right. So, my attention can be on the pain experience, but what am I doing with my attention? Am I fighting with the pain? Am I trying to escape the pain? Am I trying to change my experience? Or am I
Mm.
just accepting this is where I am in this moment? There's a big difference,
Oh, yes.
right?
Yes.
So if I am experiencing pain and I say, this is where I am and I accept that, that pain experience is going to transmute and move into whatever, because things change, things
Mhm.
are changing.
Mhm.
It's going to have, it has a chance to move and transform and transmute, right? And it will
Yes.
transmute into this tight sensation, into this energetic field. Is that's what it'll do because I've experienced that. So my attention's still on the pain, but I'm not doing anything with it. Right.
So it's how you're thinking about it, like what you just said. So if
Yeah.
I'm resisting it or if
Yeah.
I'm in the trying to put maybe some current cultural language, if I'm stuck in the pain and, "Oh, this is so bad," like the
That's it.
woe.
Yeah. Stuck. Now, stuck is an interesting term that's really in the, it's really in the personal coaching space, personal development space. And I just have a comment about that. We're vibrational beings. We're energetic beings. So there's actually no such thing as stuck. We're just actually vibrating in a very dense field for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but that right there, instead of I'm stuck, is completely different. Oh, I'm just in a dense energy field at the moment. This is it's completely different.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, so I that really changed my all of a sudden I felt empowered and I was actually able to find some leverage into my healing and find some empowerment. And then the doctor that I found, Dr. Peter Prescott, who wrote this beautiful book,
Mm.
Punctual Pain and Innovative Mind Body Approach. He's got beautiful exercises at the back of the book. And my book, The Way Through Chronic Pain Tools to Reclaim Your Healing Power, is like this follow up kind of patient follow up book to his. And he was this holistic doctor, which I hadn't had any experience until I met him. So
Yeah.
40 years, and then this guy shows up and he says, I'd had all kinds of surgery on my back from the injury, and the chronic pain was because of back injury, and then lots of surgery and doctors, all this stuff, therapists and things, physical therapists. And Peter looks at me and he says, I don't need to look at your x-rays or your records. I just want to know who you are. And I was like,
Different.
who are you? And where have you been all my life?
Yeah. So before you met this doctor, where were you on this awareness, this consciousness, this understanding that I'm just vibrating in a dense energy right now? Was that part of who you were before the injury, before the surgeries, before you met the doctor? Or did a lot of that come from meeting him and what you've learned from working together?
That that came from him asking a very pivotal question.
Gotcha.
It was the first question he asked in the classroom because it was a pain management program. And it prompted this whole thing. He said, in a classroom full of 20 chronic pain sufferers, he says, what are you doing to contribute to your pain?
Ooh,
And I was like, inside, I was so reactive. I was like, how dare you ask a question like that in this room? Because
Yes.
The attitude, like boom, that protective attitude, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's resistance popping up,
This,
right? Yeah.
this
Like, yeah.
defensive, like I'm going to protect myself at all costs kind of stuff,
Yes.
whatever. And I thought, so I had that reaction, right? Don't mess with me. And don't mess with the rest of the room.
I'm
That
sure
was,
you were one of many who felt that way.
I didn't say it, but I felt it and I thought it. And a split second later, I realized, I'm sitting in complete victim mode. The pain's doing it to me, right?
Mm.
And a split second later, I realized just by him asking that question, he'd taken me from victimhood to empowerment.
Mm.
In the question is the possibility that there's something I'm doing that's contributing to my pain. Therefore, I have power.
Wow. That is
This,
so profound.
I know. He got my attention. He got my attention. And it didn't take much longer. The next thing he says is just don't judge the moment. And I'm
Mm.
like, dude, I'm just sitting here minding my own business. I'm not judging anything. Defense again. Don't mess with me. Thing, right? I've been fighting with chronic pain for 40 years. You come on with an attitude and an argument, I'll take you on. You know what I'm saying? He says, don't judge the moment. And I have that attitude in my brain. I didn't say it out loud, but I had it in my head. And about a split second later, I realized he's talking about my pain. I've been judging my pain as bad.
Mm.
And that was when this whole thing unraveled. I realized, oh, I've been in relationship with this pain and I've been trying to get rid of it and fight with it and do everything I can to like affect it. And what would a contrary action be? Just be. Don't try and engage, just experience, right? So that's a very powerful soup I've just served up.
Yeah. Well, what you just served up and stated could be life changing for so many, whatever the pain is.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I had a friend who reached out to me today. She lost a friend suddenly to a tragic accident yesterday, and she was very reactive. And so that was interesting to sit with her as she was processing. And you could see went from I'm identifying with this thing, it's who I am, to I'm having this experience, but it's not who I am.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't have to say any of that stuff. She found her way as she was
Yeah.
processing, really just attuned to the space and her energy, and kind of she came to her own conclusion. But we get swept up in our reactivity because we're
Yes.
human. Because we're human. That's what the amygdala, the reptilian part of the brain, that's what it does. We get grabbed by that. And so we have to learn how to process that stuff when we get reactive. And the easiest way to do that is to remember that there's a beautiful and profound connection between the brain and a long exhale.
Mm.
And when we do that long exhale, it sends a signal to the body to relax. And so you can use that long exhale, or you can dive into that long, deep breath, and you can get yourself back into regulation. It's even
Yeah.
better when you're with another person.
Yeah.
Even
Oh,
better.
I am all about the deep breath. I love my deep breaths. We talked before we got on, like your view of mind, body, soul is slightly a little different than mine. So just talk about that a little bit and how you see mind, body, soul.
Well, we're all one system. Mind, body, spirit is one system. We're inhabiting, the soul is inhabiting a body at the moment. And when we die, it moves on to the next realm. But for now, we're in a system. So what you do to one affects the other. And that again, it's helpful for me to realize that, because I realize when I have some kind of physical ailment, there's usually an emotional component to it. And then what's happening with my spirit.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
just as a really quick example. So if I'm sitting a little bit hunched over And I'm feeling, what does that remind you of? Right? That reminds you of somebody who's depressed
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
maybe feeling like they're carrying a big weight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, but what's happening there? We'd actually collapsed into the lung and collapsed onto the heart. And so we collapse our self-esteem.
Mm.
Well, right? So there's a lot happening there. And the soul is like, you've forgotten who you are.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's a lot. There's a lot happening there just in that one example.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, as you explain it, yes, I can totally see it. Now, would that have thought come to my mind? Probably not, but totally see it as you talked about it. The work that I do a lot of times is helping my clients to understand that the mind, body, soul works together in partnership. And many times one is disconnected from the other, or mind and soul might be easier to get working together, and then the body's a little bit harder. Whether it's listening to the body's messages, whether it's listening to the body's pain or listening to the body's nudges, it could be so many different things. So that's how I view the mind, body, soul. And when you can get them connected and working in partnership, is when really becomes that everything you've already talked about.
You are. Yeah, you're referring to what I'm hearing you say, and as a kind of as an example, is when we have a traumatic experience, we react in such a way to protect, and we're not processing, we're not letting the energy flow, we're actually protecting. And then the residue of that gets stuck in the body.
In the
And
body, but also the brain too,
and the,
right? We're in the mind where
in the
you
mind, well, we're disconnecting because we're
yeah,
protecting, not
yeah,
connecting. And so we've got this imbalance. Yeah, in the three systems. And you absolutely 100%. Yep.
yeah. So what would you say from your experience? So how long ago was it that you met this doctor?
It was 11 years ago.
11 years. So 40 years of chronic pain, 11 years, and that has changed your life.
Significantly, yes.
Yes. And so what is the pain level, the chronic pain? Would you say that you still have that?
No, I went into his program of 40 years of chronic pain, and 52 days later, I walked out with no pain.
Wow.
I know, and he
Wow.
had a 94% success rate in that program, so it wasn't like I'm so special, it wasn't like that.
Wow.
So, yeah, that and
That's
now
amazing.
what's interesting is I still have the behaviors that led up to the chronic pain in the first place. That's my growing edge, is the
Yeah.
hypervigilant tendency and the, "Oh, what's gonna happen?" and the which is all old trauma responses that are taking a minute to they just so deeply imprinted in me.
That's what I was say. That's the body's response to it,
Yeah.
right?
It
Like it's
just taken a minute to unwind. That
yeah.
network in the brain is pretty extensive. Rewiring that's taken a little time, but yeah.
What would you say is your biggest lesson that you learned?
My biggest lesson is getting clear on my identity,
Mm,
the true self, making sure that I can keep track of that versus the egoic self and listening to the heart
yeah.
and the mind, which can lead me astray. And
Yeah.
I was trained as a research scientist, so I can get pretty analytical, and that doesn't always serve.
How okay, so that's so interesting that you were trained, you said research scientist,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so some would say that the science and then what we're talking about, this mind, body, soul, like in my world, people look at me like that's just woo. And so I refer to it as, okay, I'm just gonna go woo woo here because that's just in my world, that's how people see it. How did you reconcile the research scientist and this spiritual mind, body, soul together?
Well, I can't say I'm a quantum physicist at any stretch, and I barely understand it, but I do understand enough to understand that consciousness is real
Yeah.
and that the quantum field wearing past, present, and future all at once, which that's really interesting. And as a biological system, we're not just one being.
Mhm.
We've got, I don't know, trillions of cells inside of us, and each one of it is a is its own like working system. So we're a community.
Yeah.
And what 90% of the DNA in the human body isn't human. It's some from some other critter. So we're a community. So we're already in this system. And that was the thing about I was a scientist and an ecologist. That was my area. So I already knew systems.
Yep.
I had studied animal behavior and evolution and just systems and how things change over time. And so we're a system. That's just the way I see it. And the system is the mind, body, and soul. That's just the way I see it. You know,
Yeah. No.
you look at a dog or a cat or a horse, you're going to see a soul in there.
Yeah.
And you're going to see a mind and you're going to sense a mind, a body, and a soul. They're all there. You just have to experience them to understand that. If you
Yeah.
have
Yep.
that
Yep.
experience. So all
I
came from somewhere.
Yep, yep. And it's so very easy to have them disconnect. And so the reason why what I'm saying is so I do believe I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And part of what I'm on this earth to do is learn the lessons that I came here to learn. One of my lessons that I came here to learn has been there is more than what goes on my mind. My mind is not telling me the truth. And where's my truth coming from? And so I had to learn to go within, go to my soul and find the truth. And now the piece that I'm working on now is paying more attention to the body's messages and my own intuitive gifts, my own intuitive skills. We all have them. They all just might not be turned on, right? And so I think that sometimes, I'm going to say not sometimes, many times, we're in this life and those three pieces are disconnected and not fully charged or fully snapping together in order to live this life at our best capacity.
Yeah, you're talking about balance. How do you
Yeah.
find balance? That's where my yoga practice comes in so beautifully. That's just a great way. That's why where meditation comes in is so helpful.
Yeah.
Just find that balance and it helps us remember who we are, that we're a
Yes.
spiritual being having a human experience and that, as you said, I have a daily practice because I have to remind myself every morning, this is how we're doing life now. We're not doing this associated thing. And if something happens, like I had somebody try and spam me yesterday in a very scary way. And I felt myself, "Rrr." It's like, okay, sit down, do your breathing. Don't make a decision until you've gotten yourself regulated again. Because you're not going to, whatever's going to come out of this mind and dysregulation is going to be less than optimal. And
That right there is another powerful, profound practice and statement.
right. So I thought that's a growing edge. It's just like the awareness that I know that I'm dysregulated. That's where the meditation, practicing awareness, I'm practicing awareness and I'm trying to, then I take it off the mat into my day and I try and stay aware. Now, my word for the year, every year for a while now has been presence.
Mm,
So I'm still working on that. I can be present, but I notice because my old habit, right? Whoop! I just, I'll just exit and I'm like,
yeah.
oh, I'll come back. So it happens. I get various things happen and I just, my old habit will assert itself and yeah, I notice it and come back. But we are having the experience that we're having.
Right. And yes. And I love that my last question that I usually ask is that the challenges and how you move through them. And you just gave a perfect example of that. Like just because you're here, stuff still comes up.
It definitely does. And I'm grateful that there are tools because like the breath and balance and meditation and all these things. And because I got by on my wits for most of my life. And then I found out there were tools and I was like, oh my God, there's tools. This is great.
Yeah.
So I might get into a rut again during the day where something happens and here I am again in this activated hypervigilant space. And I got a tool in my tool belt I can pull out. And it's not that I don't get activated, it's that I don't get as activated when I do. And I come back into hope. into this balance.
Sure. And I'm not sure that any of us will ever, quote unquote, not be activated. It's what you do at the point of being activated. That's where, okay, did I react? Did I lose my shit? Did I go to the fridge? Did I go to the bottle? Like, it's what did we do when activated
That's right.
that shows where you're at.
Yeah, it reveals the current growing edge for sure.
Yes. Yes. Oh, that's a beautiful way to say it, the growing edge. That's a beautiful way to say that. Yeah. Because there's always going to be something that's, I just believe until the day we die, there will be things, lessons that we still need to learn. And that's part of the activation process, right? Like those are those messy and challenging things in our life that become the catalyst for awareness, growth, and transformation.
Beautiful.
And that's what we chose to come here to do, to learn.
That's right. We did.
Elizabeth, this has been a very fun and fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining me. Before we sign off, would you please just share where our listeners could get in touch with you if they wanted to know more about you and the work you do?
Sure. Thank you. I've enjoyed it myself. You can find me at my website, which is my name, Elizabeth with a dash, Kipp.com. You got to put a hyphen between Elizabeth and Kipp to find me. Otherwise, you'll find ElizabethKipp.com, which is a web designer and a photographer who's amazing. Me. So Elizabeth with a hyphen, Kipp.com. There's lots of free resources on there. You can book a session with me through there, and you can get all my social media links are there. So that's Elizabeth-Kipp.com central.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for being part of today's journey. I hope our time together brought you moments of insight, heightened awareness, and a spark of empowerment. If this episode resonated with you, I encourage you to share it with a friend. You can connect with me or today's guest through the show notes. I'm always here to offer support to guide you deeper on your path. Remember, mind, body, soul mastery is a continuous journey of growth. Be gentle with yourself as your awareness deepens. Grace and compassion will guide you forward. Until next time, I'm Brenda Stott Tomlinson, here to guide you as you embrace your journey of mind, body, soul mastery.